Okay, so the fan job is done, and now I'm working on the spacer job that I had mentioned in a previous video I made. So basically, I've taken off the fuel rail, or removed it, so I could remove this out. It's going to get a spacer, and this intake cover, I'm going to paint the car. I have a rattle can of the car's color, so I'm just going to do that real quick. I'm etching it in with a special etch primer. Cleaned it all off, so it should hold on to the paint a lot better. All right, got the spacer on, put on the sealant and a new gasket. So in a nutshell, the new gasket is on this side. There is a left and right gasket. I'll put the part number in. So the driver's side, I guess, would be the left. That one was different. I was kind of surprised, but if you look at the configuration of how it wraps around the bolts and so forth, you'll figure it out. It's pretty easy. But I think it's the digits 114 is the last part number. But regardless, spacer's in, and then the side that goes to the manifold got the sealant. And I'll share the sealant as well. It supposedly doesn't dry that fast. So tomorrow, I'm in no rush. And again, I don't know if I've mentioned this, I painted this the same color as the car. I don't know if it really shows up, but the injectors are still in place. I got covers over them. I lost one of the nuts that holds down the injector rail, fuel rail. So I'm gonna have to figure out what size that is, threading. Putting in my spacer, and got a few other videos about it, but I just found out that on an 87 model, for whatever reason, I guess the intake is a little bit different. And so when you install the spacer, this fuel rail right here is impossible to get a tool down there. And so I was told to use needle nose and all kinds of other stuff. What I found was just using a long screwdriver, going in here and spinning the nut. I had to buy a nut that without the backing, what do you call it, the nylon backing, where it anti-back, where it won't go out. I was told it didn't need to be super tight. Still have to put the fuel injector clamps on, so those will hold those in place. I think I'm in good shape. We'll do a leak test after the fact, but that's where we go from now. All right, so on my fuel rail, I had to do this on both sides. At least I think I needed to, because when you put the spacer in, if you look at this side here, it's quite a bit thicker, and you look at the side where it gets the closest to the spacer, it makes it very, very tight and hard. It feels like the fuel rail is just right against the spacer. So I grinded that down on the sides, and it fits in a lot smoother. So I use this grinding tool, and then also I also grinded down this vice grip to really narrow points. I don't know if you can see it or not. I have a grinding wheel, and the reason I did that is to get this fuel connection off. I think in the past I just left it on, but you have to have a really thin wrench, and for a 19 millimeter, and so I literally could not find one. I looked without spending a bunch of money or just taking another 19 millimeter and grinding it down again. I just decided to grind. I, for whatever reason, have two of these, and so now I have one that's pointy. But anyway, I think that's would be helpful for anybody. So that looks like that's welded on there at one point, obviously, and I was able to grab corners and then spin that off with the 19. Now I did use the 19 with that I'd used on a previous job to remove the I think the the fuel filter, and I basically have an extension that makes like, I don't know, like 2 or 2.5 foot long, and I was able to get that off pretty easily after PB blasting it, but it was really on there tight. Been on there for probably over 30 years. All right, just wanted to quickly talk about this. So that nut down there, and there's one on the other side, it's an M6, thread pitch is 1. I used on that side over there a wing nut that I grinded down the wing, and it was a lot easier to tighten it down. So just another words of wisdom, this side I did not, and I'm probably not going to take it off. I'll just put some blue Loctite on it and go. Also to note, this side was even tighter than this side, so I would tell you to, besides what we had talked about grinding here, while it's off obviously, is on the L part, the bottom part where the screw mounts to, you would need to open up the hole. So I just manually did it with a round file, and opened it up several millimeters so you could push it out, because it's going to hit, at least if you have an 87 model. So do that and you're going to be in a lot better shape. I want to quickly talk about this fuel line. So this is right on the front of the railing. I think I even talked about in a video about trying to figure out a way to loosen it up. It was so tight. But what I wanted to say is I've replaced all the rear fuel lines, and they sell this fuel line at Pelican for $100. So I was going to try to do an AN, I think it's American Navy connection. What I didn't know was that American Navy connection, AN connections, are actually for American threads, and I probably could do a conversion and convert it from standard to metric, or actually metric to standard, but I decided that the better route was just to either buy one of these or have one remade again. So I went down to Earl's on Gasolina Alley in Indianapolis, and very knowledgeable guy, but he looked at mine and he goes, well, it's really stiff. You can tell I'm kind of really forcing it. He said, why are you replacing it? I was like, well, it's old, and it's 30, 40 years old, 38 years old. He's like, oh yeah, I could do that. And I was wanting to do the AN connection just because it looks cooler. And he's like, to be honest with you, I would not waste your time. And he talked me into it. He goes, your connection's fine. I was like, yeah, I kind of screwed up one there with a little bit nard, but for the most part, it screws in fine. And he's like, okay, well, just let me redo this. And you can tell, I mean, it's so much flexible now. And I was like, well, I mean, how much pressure will this one take? And he goes, 300-400 pounds of square inch, I think he said. And I was like, oh, I was like, shoot, the factory, I'm sure it's not even close to 100. So yeah, he says, yeah, I usually try to go err on the safe side. But regardless, he made it. And so from Pelican, all new parts, $100 plus shipping. Earl's use these, the female connection. I don't know if that's male. I'm not cool. I don't know the whole part of how these fuel lines work and if males, females, but I'm assuming that's female, but I don't know. I'd have to compare it with a female one, but yeah, $20. Right. I have taken the cover off. I've cleaned it with alcohol. I put the sealant on it, and with the new cover, the new gasket covers there. It's got drops to key it to hold it in, and we're ready to put it on. I've got both of the intake spacers on. This one just got glued on, or not glued on, it got sealed up. New gasket, so both left and right gaskets are installed. So I'm pretty happy with it. I don't, what I noticed when I was screwing in this time, it looks like I may have done it too tight, but the paint popped off. I was a little bit disappointed with that, or maybe I didn't put enough of the etching paint down in those areas. It was lighter, but it lifted, so I'll just hit it a little bit with touch-up paint. But anyways, it's let it dry and then start putting on the fuel rail. And all right, guys, I come home from work and I noticed this line of coolant that went all the way out to the garage. And at first I didn't know it was coolant. I was like, what is this stuff? Because I work on the gasoline into the fuel rails, and I'm like, what caused this? So I'm racking my brain, started to isolate it. And what I had done is, when I was messing with this fuel regulator position with the railing, I had loosened that bolt. And so I've already put everything back on, and I didn't tighten that back down. And to be honest, I totally forgot that was a cover that covers, a jacket that covers the coolant system. I didn't tighten it down. And so I put everything back together. I'm like, what am I gonna do? So I bought a set of these, I think they're called crow's feet. And basically, allows me to get into that spot very easily. And I was able to tighten it up with no problem. So if you're in a snag and you don't want to take something apart, you might want to consider getting crow's feet. I think it's about 20 bucks. I got it on Amazon. Hey guys, I wanted to quickly talk about this. So down in here, there's a coolant sensor. I had noticed that it was marginally leaking, and I decided to use my Crowfoot that I bought, talked about in a previous video, removed it, and then added, after cleaning it up a little bit, I added this thread sealant that I bought on Amazon, and put it back in, and it should help with marginal leaking. Just note, make sure when you're putting it on, don't put it on all the threads, because part of it is ground. And all right, well, I took the car out for a quick ride, verifying no fuel leaks from the back here, up front. Everything's fine. So now just need to put it all back together finally. I put the nozzles back on, and I think we're good to go. Did I notice any power? I kind of did, but it just could be in my mind. But either way, it looks pretty cool. And the job's done. I'd like to remind you to subscribe and see next video is coming up. We'll be installing some chips, performance chips. We'll talk about the brand. I bought them 10 years ago from somebody. Hopefully they're designed for an automatic. We'll find out.